Okay, guys, we're going to talk about hypocalcemia. And again, hypocalcemia is defined as a blood level of calcium that's less than 8.5 milliequivalents per liter. And let's quickly review again the potential causes of hypocalcemia. Number one, hypoparathyroidism, just low parathyroid hormone, right? And that can be to tumor. Tumor can either cause hypersecretion or hyposecretion. Pancreatitis, right now you just take that one on faith. I'll explain that later. Acute renal failure, again, when the kidney fails, all the functions of that kidney fail. And in order to get calcium back into the blood from the nephron, that requires ATP. And one of the first things to go is the ability to reabsorb calcium back into the blood. So instead of the nephron reabsorbing it back into the blood, it pees it into the toilet, all right? And then alkalosis. And if you don't remember how calcium is affected by the pH of the blood, then you need to return to the chemical buffers and how albumin works. And then low vitamin D. Low vitamin D is needed to absorb calcium from the gut. So if you have low vitamin D, then you have low calcium in the blood, right? Now, watch. You get vitamin D from being exposed to ultraviolet light. The synthesis or the formation of vitamin D begins in the skin. Then it goes to the liver, where it's worked on a little bit more, and then it's finally activated by the kidney. So both liver failure and kidney failure can lead to low vitamin D and ultimately hypocalcemia. So these are some of the big causes. All right, now here we go again. Remember, calcium affects sodium leak and voltage gated channels, right? And if we look at the nerve, this is the node of Ranvier. So this is where the electrical impulses, the action potentials in nerves of your brain and your peripheral nervous system, where they start. In order for a nerve to fire, sodium has to leak in through a sodium ion channel. And when enough sodium, what happened there? When enough sodium leaks in, try that again. It's going to cause that nerve to fire. Now, what does high or low levels of calcium do? Low levels of calcium in the blood. Low levels of calcium in the blood make sodium leak in more. So if more sodium leaks into that nerve because there's low levels of calcium, then that's going to cause the nerve to fire more frequently. And if the calcium level gets low enough, the nerve will continually fire. And if it's a motor nerve that innervates skeletal muscle, that nerve will fire so frequently that the muscle won't be able to relax, and you will get tetany. Well, you saw it there. Yeah? So, low levels of calcium in the blood make the nervous system more active. So, in terms of your brain, what's the most neural activity you can have without dying? That's seizure, convulsions, right? So if you remember that low levels of calcium make sodium leak into nerves more frequently, that's going to cause the nerves to fire more frequently. And if they stimulate muscle, the muscles are going to be contracting, they're going to be spasming, and if the calcium level gets low enough, then you're going to get tetany. Now, the effects on the heart. The biggest one is the QT. and you'll learn more about this, just remember this. The QT interval. So you have the P wave, you learn this, then you have the QRS complex. So the P wave represents the atria contracting, then the QRS represents both ventricles contracting, and then the T wave represents both ventricles, the electrolytes within those cells resetting, so you can do it all over again, right? So the QT interval, so you measure from the Q to the end of the T, that becomes prolonged. Now, if you look and you recall the cardiac action potential, right? If you remember that in the heart, okay, you got the blood and then you got a heart cell, okay, and remember, and we'll just talk about leak channels for right now, right? You got sodium, oh, it's a good color, there we go, potassium, and you have calcium leak channels. Then we got our buddy, our pal, the sodium potassium pump. Where's sodium highly concentrated? In the blood. So this is the cell membrane of a heart cell. So this is a heart cell, the inside. Where's potassium highly concentrated? Always inside. And calcium, the heart and blood vessels again rely on calcium from the blood to contract. So in order for the heart to fire, sodium has to leak in and calcium has to leak in. So sodium and calcium cause the heart to depolarize or fire. So what does low levels of calcium in the blood do to sodium channels? Well, it makes them more leaky. So that means more sodium will rush in. So one of the things you will see is an increase in heart rate. Now, what's the most important element in muscular contraction? Somebody stop me. Calcium. Where does the heart get its calcium from to contract? The blood. So if the blood levels of calcium are low, there will be less calcium going into the heart cell muscle, and as a result the heart will not contract as hard, decrease force of contraction, which will lead to a decrease in blood pressure. Also, because that force of contraction is becoming weaker, these people can go into heart failure. Now, this is relatively rare, but it still happens. So, what are the effects on the heart? It's going to cause sodium to be more leaky, so your heart rate's going to go up. The QT interval is going to be wider, and there's going to be a drop in the force of contraction of the heart because there's less calcium in the blood available for that heart muscle to contract. So the nervous system becomes more irritable, right? Seizures, convulsions, muscle spasms, tetany, and the heart becomes weaker because there's less calcium available to contract. All right? So the hypocalcemia and the effects on the heart, prolonged QT, decreased myocardial muscle contraction, right? Because of less calcium, and decrease in blood pressure. So those are the big clinical manifestations of hypocalcemia. And again, if you understand that low levels of calcium make nerves more leaky to sodium, and sodium's got to leak in for that nerve to fire, then you understand its effects on the nervous system, and you should also understand its effects on the heart. All right? Now, hypercalcemia. That's defined as the blood level of calcium, not less. Whoops. That should be greater. Timmy made a mistake. Don't hate, nobody's perfect. Alright. A blood level of calcium greater than 10.5 milliequivalents. Alright. The most common cause of hypercalcemia is hyperparathyroidism or a parathyroid tumor. Vitamin D toxicity, taking too much vitamin D, and immobility, right? So watch. When muscles aren't used, bones thin. They develop osteoporosis. That's why the elderly develop osteoporosis. A lot of them are very immobile, right? The bones thin because immobility stimulates osteoclasts, and osteoclasts break down bone. That's why when you break your leg, they want to get you into a walking cast as soon as possible, because if that leg is casted, you're not using the muscles weaken, and then the bones weaken as well due to that immobility. Alright? Now, little mnemonic you can try to remember, right? For hypercalcemia is its bones, thrones, moans, and psychiatric overtones. I don't know. I'm going to explain it to you my way, but if you remember that, it will help you. Alright? The clinical manifestations of hypercalcemia is, I just explained this to you, bone pain due to bone breakdown or bone thinning. Alright? Now, thrones is toilet, you're peeing all the time. Increased calcium levels in the blood make the nephron less sensitive to ADH. Alright? More on that in the endocrine section, but just real quick. ADH decreases urine output. I'm going to make it real simple. Decreases urine output. You'll produce less urine. Right? So when ADH is high, you make less urine. So if high levels of calcium in the nephron make the nephron less sensitive to ADH, you will pee a lot. Moans is, and we'll go over this, increased calcium decreases neural activity in the GI tract. It decreases neural activity everywhere. And as a result, if your GI tract ain't contracting, because you need nerves to make those muscular wall of the GI tract contract, you will get constipated because you eat something and it won't empty through the stomach gets over distended, and you get nauseated, and because your stomach is full because your GI tract ain't moving, you really don't have an appetite either. Now, these psychiatric overtones, the classic ones are being depressed, lethargic, and muscle weakness. Let's go back to the neuron and the heart. Alright? What did low levels of calcium do to neural activity, or the amount of sodium leaking in? Low levels of calcium make the nerves leakier to sodium. And the more they leak in, more sodium leaks in, the more frequently they fire. Now, let's talk about high levels of calcium. High levels of calcium are going to do the exact opposite. They're going to block sodium channels. So high levels of calcium in the blood will block sodium channels, and the nerve fires less frequently. Less frequently. I don't know why that's happening. So, nerves that innervate muscle are not going to be firing because high levels of calcium in the blood block those sodium channels, and you need sodium to leak in that nerve for it to fire. So there's less firing of motor nerves, so the muscles become weak, flaccid, right? Flaccid is, just limp. And because there's less calcium or high calcium, it's going to affect brain activity, and it suppresses neural activity, right? So these people will be depressed, lethargic, right? And if the calcium level gets high enough, they can go into a coma and die. Now, one of its big effects on the heart is that it decreases the QT interval. So you're kind of squishing the EKG complex closer together. So calcium squishes, makes that QT interval shorter. It also is going to decrease your heart rate. So they can develop bradycardias, right? Bradycardia, brady means low or slow. Bradycardia, low. So low heart rate. And again, what's the most important element in muscular contraction? Cut it out. It's calcium. Where does the heart get its calcium from to contract? Well, let's review. Let's get rid of this low, right? Now our problem is that we got too much calcium in the blood. So, if you got too much calcium in the blood, what does high levels of calcium do to sodium leak channels in the heart? It blocks them. And in order for the heart to fire, to produce a heartbeat, sodium's got to leak in. So if high levels of calcium block sodium channels in the heart and nerves, then that's going to decrease your heart rate. But what's the most important element in muscular contraction? Calcium. So the calcium is higher in the blood. That means more calcium can go into the heart cells. So you will get a decrease in heart rate, but you will get an increase in the force of contraction of the heart. So this person can become hypertensive. And really, it's actually kind of a hallmark of hypercalcemia, where their heart rate will be low, but their calcium, because their calcium level's high, their blood pressure is high. So those are some of the clinical manifestations, causes of hypercalcemia. Now, one of the treatments for hypercalcemia is, first of all, is to find out the cause, right? What's causing it? If it's a parathyroid tumor, well, then you do surgery on the parathyroid gland to remove it, right? If it's vitamin D toxicity, right, then stop giving them vitamin D. But if you recall, we learned that magnesium is a natural calcium channel blocker. So one of the short-term treatments for hypercalcemia is magnesium sulfate, because magnesium blocks calcium channels, and that will improve their neural status as well as their cardiovascular status. All right, so I hope that helped.